The ancient hatchback, packed to the brim with Alara Vance's carefully curated life, sputtered its last complaint as it crested the final hill into Oakhaven. Below, nestled like a secret gem in the crook of the coastline, lay the village. A patchwork of slate roofs glinted under the late afternoon sun, a scatter of colorful fishing boats bobbed in the tiny harbor, and the air, even from this distance, smelled distinctly of salt and possibility. Alara took a deep, fortifying breath. This was it. The escape, the new beginning, the radical departure from a life that had slowly, insidiously, stifled her until she could barely breathe. No more sterile office cubicles, no more endless spreadsheets, no more the lukewarm comfort of a relationship that had withered into polite indifference. Oakhaven was a blank page, a fresh start, and the old cottage waiting for her was the first sentence. Her new home, a ramshackle affair known locally as Seagull's Rest, was perched precariously on a slight incline overlooking the main street, its weathered clapboard siding a cheerful shade of faded periwinkle blue. A wild tangle of honeysuckle choked the porch, and the windows, though grimy, promised views of the sea if one squinted just right. It was far from perfect, far from the polished, minimalist aesthetic she'd once aspired to, but it hummed with a quiet history, a promise of stories untold. Unlocking the front door, a heavy, creaking slab of oak, felt momentous. The air inside was cool and still, thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten dust. Sunlight, filtered through the overgrown garden, painted soft, shifting patterns on the wooden floorboards. It was smaller than she remembered from the online photos, more rustic, but a warmth, an undeniable sense of belonging, settled over her. This was hers. All of it. The peeling wallpaper in the tiny kitchen, the uneven floorboards that dipped playfully in the living room, the steep, winding staircase that led to a bedroom with sloped ceilings and a single, surprisingly large window. The first few days were a blur of unpacking boxes, scrubbing away decades of grime and discovering the cottage's charming eccentricities. The kitchen sink always dripped, a rhythmic plink 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 that became a strangely soothing soundtrack. The top right drawer in the dresser stuck stubbornly, requiring a firm tug and a muttered curse. And the garden, oh, the garden! It was a riot of untamed roses, tenacious weeds, and the skeletal remains of what might once have been a thriving vegetable patch. Alara, whose gardening experience extended only to a single long-suffering houseplant, felt a thrill of challenge. She spent her evenings curled on the small, worn sofa she'd inherited with the house, a mug of steaming chamomile tea in her hands, watching the twilight deepen over Oakhaven. The village, so quiet during the day, seemed to come alive with a gentle hum as dusk settled. Lights flickered on in distant windows, the faint murmur of voices drifted up from the pub down the street, and the rhythmic clang of a buoy bell echoed from the harbor. One night, as the moon climbed high and full, painting the sea with a shimmering silver path, Alara noticed it. A light. Not the steady, reassuring beam from the old decommissioned lighthouse that stood sentinel on the cliff edge to the north. That beacon had been dark for decades, a picturesque ruin. This was a different light. It emanated from a small, solitary cottage nestled at the very base of the lighthouse, almost hidden by the rugged terrain. It wasn't a bright, insistent glow, but a soft, almost ethereal luminescence, like a captured moonbeam, that seemed to pulse gently, rhythmically, against the inky canvas of the night sky. It was mesmerizing. Her curiosity, a trait long suppressed by the practicalities of her old life, began to stir. Who lived there? What was that light? It wasn't electric, not really. It had a quality that felt older, almost magical. She asked Mrs. Gable, the kind, bustling owner of the village's only general store, when she went to buy cleaning supplies and a fresh loaf of bread. "Oh, that's Kaelin Thorne's place," Mrs. Gable said, her eyes twinkling as she weighed out some local cheese. "The old lighthouse keeper's cottage. They call him Kale, or just K for short. Been there his whole life, practically." "Kaelin Thorne?" Alara repeated, the name rolling pleasantly off her tongue. "And the light?" Mrs. Gable chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. "Kale's a carpenter, the best in Oakhaven if you ask me, and a bit of an artist too. Builds boats that sail like dreams, furniture that feels like it grew right out of the wood. The light, well, that's just Kale. He's a quiet one, keeps to himself. But he's got a way with things, a way of making beauty. He's always working on something up there, even late into the night. Some say he's got a special lamp, some sort of old ship's lantern. Others say it's just the reflection of the moon and heel. Some say..." Elara felt a strange pull. The idea of a man who worked with his hands, creating beauty in the quiet solitude of a lighthouse keeper's cottage, resonated deeply with something within her. She imagined him, framed by that soft moonlike glow, his hands skilled and sure, shaping wood into something magnificent. It was a romantic image, utterly removed from the slick, hurried world she'd left behind. Her own plans for the cottage were beginning to take shape. She envisioned a small stationery shop downstairs, a place filled with beautiful papers, elegant pens, and the comforting scent of old books. A haven for creativity, a quiet corner in a quiet town. But Seagull's Rest needed more than just a good scrub and a fresh coat of paint to become that haven. It needed love. And it needed repairs. More specifically, it needed a new set of shelves built into the alcove where she planned to display her most exquisite handcrafted cards, and the old front porch needed to be made safe before any customers could step foot on it. The floorboards sagged in places and a couple of the steps were distinctly wobbly. She'd tried to fix the wobbling steps herself, armed with a hammer and a handful of nails she'd bought from Mrs. Gable's store. The result was less than stellar. The first step, now adorned with a series of bent nails and splintered wood, still wobbled, perhaps even more precariously than before. The second step, in her zeal, she'd somehow managed to detach almost entirely from the frame. It lay forlornly against the rosebush, a monument to her utter lack of DIY prowess. A sigh escaped her lips as she surveyed the damage. "Well, Elara," she muttered to the detached step. "That went well." It was clear. She needed help. Professional help. And according to Mrs. Gable, Caelan Thorne was the man. But Mrs. Gable had also mentioned he was hard to pin down, busy with bigger projects, and preferred to work alone. The thought of approaching the quiet, solitary carpenter made a flutter start in her stomach. He sounded formidable in his own gentle way. But her dreams for the shop, for her new life, depended on it. The next morning, fortified by strong coffee and a resolve she didn't quite feel, Elara decided to find Caelan Thorne. She asked for directions from Mr. Henderson, the gruff but kindly postman, who pointed a weathered finger towards the cliffs. "Up past the old lighthouse, miss. You can't miss his place, it's the only one there. Just knock loud. He might not hear you over the saw." The walk was invigorating if a little daunting. The path wound upwards, past wind-stunted trees and clumps of resilient wildflowers, the air growing sharper, cleaner, The old lighthouse loomed larger with every step, its red brick facade softened by ivy, its glassless lantern room a gaping eye. And then, at its base, nestled into a natural hollow, was the cottage. It was smaller than Elara had imagined from her window, but sturdier, built of stone and dark wood, with a chimney that promised warmth and a porch that looked out over the vast, sparkling expanse of the sea. A small, scruffy terrier mix with intelligent eyes and mismatched ears was curled on the porch, fast asleep in a patch of sunlight. Elara hesitated, not wanting to disturb him. But before she could decide, the dog's ears twitched, then he lifted his head, regarding her with a sleepy, unconcerned gaze. He then stretched, yawned, and gave a single, welcoming thump of his tail against the wooden boards. "Hello there," Elara whispered, extending a tentative hand. The dog patted over, sniffing her fingers cautiously before licking them once, gently. He had a tag that read, "Barnacle." "Barnacle, is it?" she murmured, scratching him behind the ears. He leaned into her touch, a low rumble starting in his chest. Just then, a sound drifted from around the side of the cottage, the rhythmic thud-thud of a hammer hitting wood, followed by the high-pitched whine of a saw. He was here. He was working. Taking another deep breath, Elara followed the sound, Barnacle trotting beside her like an old friend. She rounded the corner of the cottage and found herself in a large, open-sided workshop, filled with the rich, earthy scent of sawdust and fresh-cut timber. Tools of every description hung neatly on pegboards, glinting in the sunlight. Half-finished projects sat on sturdy workbenches, the skeleton of a small boat, a delicate wooden frame, a stack of intricately carved panels. And there he was. Caelan Thorne was even more imposing than she'd imagined. He stood with his back to her, bent over a workbench, his broad shoulders straining the fabric of his worn denim shirt. His dark hair was tied back in a loose knot, and a few stray strands clung to the nape of his neck. He was tall, lean, and moved with an economy of motion that spoke of long hours spent in physical labor. The hammer in his hand seemed an extension of his arm as he tapped a chisel with precise, unhurried movements. Barnacle gave a soft whine, nudging Alara's hand. Kalen stiffened, then slowly straightened, turning towards them. His eyes, when they met hers, were the color of deep sea moss, framed by faint lines at the corners that hinted at hours spent squinting into the sun and the horizon. They were intelligent, calm, and held a depth that made Alara feel, for a fleeting moment, as though he could see right through her, past her carefully constructed anxieties, and straight to the hopeful, slightly terrified core of her being. He had a strong, angular face, dusted with sawdust, and a faint smudge of something dark across his cheekbone. He wasn't conventionally handsome in the smooth, polished way of the city men she'd known, but there was a rugged attractiveness about him, a quiet strength that was infinitely more captivating. He simply waited, his hands, calloused and strong, resting on the workbench, holding the chisel. Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. She'd always been a little awkward, prone to tripping over her words when nervous. Now, under his calm, steady gaze, her carefully rehearsed opening lines flew clean out of her head. "Hello?" she managed, her voice a little higher than she would have liked. "I'm Alara Vance. I've just moved into Seagull's Rest, the old periwinkle cottage down by the main street." She gestured vaguely in the direction of the village. Kalen nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible dip of his head. He didn't speak, just continued to watch her. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant cry of gulls and the gentle lapping of waves against the cliffs below. I heard you're the best carpenter in Oakhaven," she continued, feeling a desperate need to fill the quiet. "Mrs. Gable from the general store, she recommended you." His lips twitched, a tiny hint of a smile that softened the stern line of his mouth. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Mrs. Gable is generous with her praise," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly gentle. It was the first time she'd heard him speak, and it was like the sound of pebbles rolling in the tide. "Well, I need some help with my cottage," Alara blurted out, her composure slipping further. "The porch, mostly, and some shelves. I tried to fix one of the steps myself, and I think I might have made it worse. Much worse, actually. It's currently lying in a rosebush." A genuine smile finally touched Kalen's lips, a slow, warm curve that transformed his face. His eyes crinkled at the corners, and for a moment the quiet, formidable carpenter seemed approachable, even amused. "A step in a rosebush, you say?" he repeated, the barest hint of a chuckle in his voice. Alara nodded miserably. "I'm afraid so. I'm really not very good with tools, or wood, or anything structural, really." He picked up a piece of sandpaper, running it over a smooth curve of wood. "Most people aren't," he said, his gaze returning to his work, though Alara felt sure his attention was still on her. "What kind of shelves?" "Oh, for a shop," she brightened, grateful for a topic she could actually articulate. "I'm planning to open a small stationery shop, downstairs. So, sturdy shelves, for paper and pens, and journals. Beautiful things." He paused, then looked up again, his gaze thoughtful. "A stationery shop, in Oakhaven." It wasn't a question but a quiet observation, tinged with curiosity. "Yes," Alara confirmed, feeling a surge of enthusiasm. "I think the village needs one, a place for people to find beautiful things, to write letters, to dream." He gave another small nod, then finally set down his chisel and walked towards her, wiping his hands on a rag. He smelled faintly of wood smoke and sea air. He stopped a respectful distance away, his height making her feel small, but not intimidated. "I can take a look at your porch," he said, his voice even. "When were you hoping to have the work done?" Ilara's heart did a little leap. He hadn't said no. He hadn't dismissed her, or her step in a rosebush disaster. "As soon as possible, really," she said, trying to sound professional and not like a desperate woman who couldn't even nail a plank straight. "I'm hoping to open the shop in a few weeks." He considered this, his gaze drifting past her, towards the distant village. "I have a few projects on," he admitted, his brow furrowing slightly. "But a porch and some shelves? I could probably swing by tomorrow morning. Take a proper look." "Tomorrow?" Alara repeated, relief flooding her. "Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Kalen. Truly." He gave her another one of his slow, almost smiles. "Kale is fine," he said. 10 o'clock? Perfect, she said, feeling lighter than she had in days. I'll put the kettle on. As she turned to leave, Barnacle nudged her hand again, as if wishing her farewell. Alara scratched his ears one last time, then started back down the winding path. The image of Caelan Thorne, framed by his workshop and the sweeping sea view, burned into her mind. The air felt crisper, the sunlight brighter, and even the distant clang of the buoy bell sounded like a cheerful chime. The Moonbeam K, she thought, a quiet, strong presence, had agreed to step into her new life. And suddenly, Oakhaven felt even more like home. Ilara's steps were lighter as she descended the winding path, the scent of salt and pine needles a heady perfume in the crisp air. The image of Caelan Thorne, a man carved from the very essence of the sea, lingered in her mind. She pictured his strong hands, calloused but gentle as he'd smoothed the cat's fur, and the way his deep-set eyes, the color of a stormy ocean, had crinkled at the corners when he'd finally smile. The smile had been brief, a fleeting glimpse of warmth, but it had left an indelible mark. She found herself humming a tuneless melody, a quiet contentment settling deep in her chest. For weeks since arriving in Oakhaven, she'd felt a subtle ache of displacement, a city girl trying to find her footing in a world of tides and timber. But the Moonbeam K, a vessel born from a shared unspoken understanding, felt like the first true anchor she'd cast in this new life. It wasn't just a boat, it was a promise, a project that would intertwine her fate with the rhythms of Oakhaven and with Caelan. Back in the village, the narrow lanes were bustling with the gentle hum of everyday life. A fishing boat chugged lazily into the harbor, its nets drying on the deck. Children, released from the small village school, chased each other with shrieks of laughter, their voices carried on the sea breeze. Alara stopped at Mrs. Henderson's bakery, drawn in by the intoxicating aroma of freshly baked bread. Afternoon, Alara, dear, Mrs. Henderson, a woman with flour-dusted hands and a smile as warm as her oven, greeted her. Just in time for a warm scone. Alara smiled back, accepting the paper bag with its delicious contents. Perfect, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you. She'd grown fond of these small, genuine interactions. They were a stark contrast to the hurried anonymity of her former life in the city, where conversations rarely extended beyond transaction. Anything exciting happening up at the cliff path? Mrs. Henderson asked, her eyes twinkling. She knew Alara often took long walks, but Alara suspected she also knew a good deal about everyone and everything in Oakhaven. Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. Just admiring the view, she said, perhaps a little too quickly. And I had a chat with Mr. Thorne about commissioning a boat. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. A boat, you say? Well, that's a grand undertaking. Caelan Thorne's work is second to none. A quiet man, but he puts his heart into every plank. She paused, then added, with a conspiratorial wink, and handsome too, if you ask me. Alara simply smiled, biting into the scone, the warmth spreading through her. She was grateful. Mrs. Henderson didn't press further, though the baker's knowing gaze suggested she'd already pieced together more than Alara had said. She continued down the main street, past the general store and the small, brightly painted art gallery, until she reached her own rented cottage. It was a charming little place, tucked away behind a climbing rosebush, with a view of the harbor from her kitchen window. Her life here was slowly taking shape. She was a writer, or at least she was trying to be again. The city had drained her inspiration, leaving her feeling hollow. Oakhaven, with its raw beauty and quiet rhythms, was meant to be her sanctuary, a place where stories could once again find their voice. The first few weeks had been spent unpacking, exploring, and trying to quiet the restless hum of her past. Now, with the promise of the Moonbeam K, a new chapter felt like it was truly beginning. She pulled out her notebook, not for her novel, but for the boat. What kind of wood? What sort of rigging? What would her new life at sea truly look like? The questions sparked a fire within her, a creative energy she hadn't felt in years. Later that evening, after a simple supper, Alara found herself staring out at the moonlit harbor. The Moonbeam K, the name Caelan had chosen for the hypothetical boat, even before she'd agreed. It felt right. It felt destined. The next morning, Alara woke with a sense of purpose. She spent the early hours sketching designs, envisioning the interior, and even looking up different types of sails. The thought of collaborating with Caelan, of bringing something beautiful and functional into existence together, filled her with a joyful anticipation. Around mid-morning, a knock echoed through her small cottage. Ilara's heart gave a little flutter. It couldn't be Kalen, could it? She opened the door to find him standing on her porch, looking a little out of place in his work clothes, a faint scent of sawdust clinging to him. He held a large, rolled-up sheet of paper. "Morning, Ilara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Kalen. Come in." She stepped aside, feeling a thrill of excitement and a touch of nervousness. He filled her small entryway, his presence radiating a quiet strength. Barnacle was nowhere in sight, and she felt a pang of slight disappointment. He unrolled the paper on her small kitchen table, revealing a meticulously drawn blueprint. I couldn't stop thinking about it after you left yesterday. Had a few ideas for the Moonbeam K. Thought you might want to see them." Ilara leaned over the table, her eyes widening. It was a stunning design. Graceful lines, a sturdy hull, and clever use of space. He'd incorporated many of the subtle hints she'd given him, even though she hadn't explicitly stated. A small, cozy cabin with a wide berth, a compact galley, and a helm designed for single-handed sailing. "Kalen, this is incredible," she breathed, tracing a finger along the curve of the hull. "It's exactly what I imagined, and more." "How did you?" He shrugged, a faint flush rising on his weathered cheeks. "You talked about wanting a vessel that felt like home, but also one that could take you anywhere. Something sturdy, but nimble. I tried to capture that." His finger hovered over a detail on the deck. "I've designed a small, integrated storage locker here for your writing materials, perhaps. Keep them dry and safe." Ilara looked up, meeting his gaze. His thoughtfulness, his attention to such a specific detail, touched her deeply. "That's incredibly kind of you, Kalen. Thank you." They spent the next hour poring over the plans, discussing wood types, sail configurations, and the subtle nuances of naval architecture that Kalen explained with a quiet passion. He spoke about the strength of oak, the resilience of teak, the way a particular curve in the hull could make all the difference in rough seas. Ilara listened intently, fascinated by his knowledge and the quiet artistry of his craft. "I'm thinking a gaff rig," he mused, pointing to the mast. "Classic, reliable, and beautiful. And for the interior, I'd suggest something simple, warm woods, maybe a few shelves for books." He glanced at the stacks of novels on her windowsill. She laughed softly. "You've really thought of everything." "It's what I do," he said, a rare, easy smile gracing his lips. It transformed his face, softening the rugged angles, and Ilara felt her breath catch. "So, what do you think? Are these plans a good starting point?" he asked, pulling himself back from the design, his gaze returning to her. "A perfect starting point," Ilara confirmed, her voice a little softer than she intended. "I'd love to be involved in the process if that's all right. Learning about the different woods, the construction. I find it all incredibly interesting." "Of course," he said, his eyes lighting up. "That's part of the joy of it. Come up to the workshop whenever you like. I'll walk you through the timber selection, show you how we shape the planks. It's a long process, building a boat, a labor of love." The phrase labor of love hung in the air between them, imbued with a subtle, unspoken meaning. Before he left, Kalen hesitated at the door. "I'll get some initial material estimates ready, and I'll sketch out a few more interior options. Any specific preferences for the galley?" "Sing. Just enough for a good cup of tea and a simple meal," Ilara replied, smiling. "And perhaps a small space for a kettle." He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. A good kettle is essential. He then turned and left, leaving behind the faint scent of sawdust and a lingering warmth in her small cottage. Ilara spent the rest of the day in a haze of creative energy. She drafted scenes for her novel, her characters suddenly imbued with the quiet strength and groundedness she'd observed in Kalen. The sea, the boats, the rhythms of Oakhaven were weaving themselves into her story, making it richer, more authentic. Over the next few weeks, the Moonbeam K became a tangible bridge between Ilara and Kalen. She made regular pilgrimages up the cliff path to his workshop. At first, she was a quiet observer, watching Kalen and his sole apprentice, a cheerful young man named Finn, as they worked. Kalen was a patient teacher, explaining the grain of the wood, the purpose of each tool, the intricate joinery that would make the boat seaworthy. Ilara found herself drawn to the rhythmic sounds of the workshop, The rasp of a plane, the tap-tap of a hammer, the soft whir of a sander. She loved the smell of wood and varnish, the way the sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating motes of sawdust dancing in the air. She learned to identify different types of timber, to appreciate the beauty of a perfectly planed surface. Kalen, in turn, began to open up, sharing anecdotes about boats he built, tales of Oakhaven's maritime history, and even a few dry jokes that always caught Alara delightfully off guard. She discovered that beneath his quiet exterior lay a deep well of passion, a profound respect for the sea, and an unexpected warmth. He was a man of few words, but every word carried weight and sincerity. One blustery afternoon, as rain lashed against the workshop windows, they were discussing the placement of the mast. Alara had brought a thermos of tea and a plate of Mrs. Henderson's shortbread. They huddled around a workbench, the blueprints spread out between them, Barnacle curled on a pile of wood shavings nearby. The mast step needs to be absolutely perfect, Kalen explained, tracing a line on the plan with a calloused finger. It's the backbone of the boat, carries all the strain. It needs to be strong, true. Alara listened, captivated. It sounds like building a boat is a lot like writing a story, she mused. Every part has to be strong, has to serve a purpose, and it all has to fit together to tell a cohesive tale. Kalen looked at her, his stormy eyes softening. That's an interesting way to put it. I suppose it is. Each boat has its own story, its own journey waiting to happen. He paused, then added, "What kind of stories do you write, Alara?" It was the first time he'd asked about her work, and Alara felt a surprising shyness. Mostly contemporary fiction, she confessed. Stories about people finding their way, discovering themselves, sometimes finding love. She felt a blush rise. I'm trying to finish my next novel here in Oakhaven. It's about a woman who leaves her old life behind to start fresh in a small coastal town. A flicker of understanding passed through Kalen's eyes. Sounds familiar, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Must be good inspiration here. It is, she agreed, her gaze meeting his. The air crackled with a comfortable tension, a nascent connection that was growing stronger with each shared moment. A few days later, a small problem arose. A particular plank of seasoned oak, intended for the hull, had developed a hairline crack during the initial shaping. It was minor, almost imperceptible, but Kalen, ever the perfectionist, declared it unusable. It's not good enough for the Moonbeam K, he stated, his jaw set. We need to find another piece. It'll set us back a few days. Alara saw the frustration in his eyes. Is there anything I can do to help? She asked. He hesitated, then looked at her. I suppose you could come with me to old Mr. Abernathy's timber yard. He sometimes has rare stock, good quality. It's a bit of a drive, out past the lighthouse. I'd love to, she said immediately, grateful for the opportunity to be more involved. The drive to Mr. Abernathy's was an adventure in itself. Kalen's old pickup truck rumbled along the winding coastal road, past dramatic cliffs and secluded coves. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by Kalen's observations about the landscape and Alara's questions about his life in Oakhaven. She learned he'd inherited the workshop from his father and his grandfather before that. Boat building was in his blood, a legacy he carried with quiet pride. Mr. Abernathy, a wizened old man with a twinkle in his eye, greeted them warmly. He led them through stacks of timber, the air thick with the scent of pine, cedar, and oak. Kalen carefully examined each plank, running his hand along the grain, tapping it with his knuckles, listening for the subtle resonance that spoke of its quality. Alara watched him, admiring his expertise, the way he moved with such purpose and knowledge. He was utterly absorbed in his craft, a man in his element. Finally, after a thorough search, he found it. A magnificent piece of quarter-sawn oak, perfectly seasoned, flawless. This is it, Kalen said, a rare note of triumph in his voice. This is for the Moonbeam K. As they drove back, the precious plank secured in the truck bed, the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. The sea shimmered, reflecting the vibrant colors. Thank you for coming with me, Alara, Kalen said, his voice soft. It was good to have you along. I enjoyed it, Kalen, she replied, meaning it sincerely. It was fascinating to see you at work, even in the timber yard. You have a real connection to the wood. He glanced at her, a small, knowing smile on his face. It's more than just wood, isn't it? It's the heart of the boat. When they returned to Oakhaven, the village lights were beginning to twinkle. Kaylin pulled up outside her cottage. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? Alara asked, her heart beating a little faster. It felt like a natural extension of their day. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I'd like that, Alara. Thank you. Inside her cozy cottage, the aroma of her simmering lentil soup mingled with the scent of sea air. She put the kettle on, and Kaylin, surprisingly, started to help, setting out mugs and spoons with an easy familiarity. They sat at her small kitchen table, the silence comfortable, punctuated by the clinking of cups and the gentle hiss of the kettle. This soup smells delicious, Kaylin said, breaking the silence. It's just a simple lentil soup, Alara demurred. But it's warm on a cool evening. Sometimes simple is best, he replied, looking out her window at the darkening harbor. Like Oakhaven. They talked about the day, about the challenges of boat building, about the joy of finding the perfect piece of wood. Alara found herself telling him more about her writing, her struggles in the city, the reasons she'd sought refuge and inspiration in Oakhaven. Kaylin listened intently, his gaze steady and understanding. It takes courage to start over, he said, when she finished. To leave everything behind for an unknown future. It does, she admitted, meeting his gaze. But sometimes, the unknown is exactly what you need. He held her gaze for a long moment, a quiet intensity in his eyes that sent a shiver down her spine. The air in the small kitchen seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings, with the growing connection between them. I should probably get going, Kaylin said finally, breaking the spell, though he made no move to leave. Stay for dinner, Alara blurted out, surprising herself. There's plenty of soup, and I made some fresh bread. He looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face, a genuine warmth radiating from him. I'd like that very much, Alara. As they ate, sharing stories and quiet laughter, Alara felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The cottage, which had often felt a little too quiet, a little too empty, suddenly felt full of warmth, full of shared understanding, full of the comfortable presence of Kaylin Thorne. The Moonbeam Quay was more than just a boat. It was building a bridge, plank by plank, between two souls who were finding their way home, together, in Oakhaven. The journey was just beginning, and Alara found herself eagerly anticipating every ripple and wave along the way. The journey was just beginning, and Alara found herself eagerly anticipating every ripple and wave along the way. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm, punctuated by the steady scrape of sandpaper against wood, the rhythmic splash of waves against the harbor wall, and the quiet hum of two lives intertwining. Kaylin appeared at her cottage each morning, a thermos of strong coffee in hand, a playful glint in his kind eyes. They would walk to the boatyard together, the scent of salt and pine needles filling the air, and immerse themselves in the quiet dedication of restoring the Moonbeam Ki. Alara discovered a surprising aptitude for the work. Kaylin was a patient teacher, guiding her hands as she learned to mix paints, to sand with the grain, to apply varnish with smooth, even strokes. He praised her progress, his genuine admiration a warm balm to a part of her that had long doubted her own practical skills. She, in turn, found herself fascinated by his meticulous nature, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the quiet satisfaction in his voice when a particularly stubborn patch of rust yielded to his efforts. One afternoon, as Alara carefully taped off a section for painting, Kaylin leaned against the hull, watching her. You have a good eye for detail, Alara, he commented, his voice soft. And a steady hand. She paused, a faint blush warming her cheeks. I'm just following your lead. You make it look so effortless. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that made her heart give a little skip. Effortless? Believe me, there's been plenty of effort poured into this old girl over the years. But it's a labor of love, isn't it? Boats have a way of getting under your skin. He pushed off the hull, coming closer. What about you, Alara? What gets under your skin? It was a simple question, yet it felt profound. She thought of her books, of course, the stories she crafted. But more recently, she realized, it was the quiet beauty of Oakhaven, the scent of the sea, the feel of the cool breeze. And, increasingly, it was the comfortable, steady presence of the man standing before her. Stories, I suppose, she began, feeling a little vulnerable. Creating worlds, finding the right words to capture a feeling. It's a different kind of building. but it requires the same kind of focus, I think. She gestured to the boat. And now this. There's something incredibly satisfying about seeing something take shape under your hands. Kalen nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. There is. It's real. Tangible. Sometimes, I think we spend too much time in the intangible, chasing things that aren't quite solid. He paused, then looked out towards the shimmering expanse of the bay. That's partly why I came back to Oakhaven. After a time away, I needed something real, something grounded. Alara didn't press him for details, sensing a deeper story there, a past he wasn't quite ready to share. But his honesty, even in its brevity, was a gift. It made her feel closer to him, part of a shared understanding that transcended mere words. As the days turned into weeks, the Moonbeam K began to transform. The faded, chipped paint gave way to a fresh, creamy white hull with a deep navy blue trim. The name, Moonbeam K, was meticulously reapplied in elegant gold leaf by Kalen, a task he insisted on doing himself, his concentration absolute. Alara often found herself simply watching him, mesmerized by the quiet artistry of his hands. Their conversations grew longer, ranging from the practicalities of boat maintenance to the philosophy of storytelling, from shared childhood memories to their hopes for the future. Alara learned that Kalen had spent years working on larger commercial vessels, traveling to distant ports, but had always felt the pull of Oakhaven, the place he considered home. He spoke of the vastness of the ocean with a reverence that resonated deeply with her own love for wild, untamed beauty. There's nothing quite like being out on the open sea, he'd told her one evening, as they shared a simple dinner of freshly caught fish at her cottage. Just you and the horizon. It puts everything into perspective. Do you miss it? She asked, watching him across the flickering candlelight. He considered this. Sometimes, the freedom, maybe, but I missed this more. He gestured vaguely around her cozy cottage, then out towards the dark, star-dusted sky. The quiet, the community, the feeling of belonging. His gaze met hers, and Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the hearth fire. And now, this, he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The this hung in the air, unspoken but understood. It was the shared meals, the comfortable silences, the easy laughter, the growing connection that was becoming the very foundation of her new life in Oakhaven. One blustery Saturday with rain lashing against the cottage windows, they decided to take a break from the boat. Kalen had brought over a collection of old Oakhaven photographs he'd found in his grandmother's attic, sepia-toned images of fishermen, bustling docks, and generations of townspeople. They sat by the fire, mugs of hot cider warming their hands, as Kalen pointed out familiar landmarks and shared anecdotes about his family, who had lived in Oakhaven for generations. That's my great-grandfather, he said, tapping a photo of a stern-looking man with a magnificent beard standing beside a small fishing boat. He built the first Thorn boatyard, right here on the harbor. Alara traced the image with her finger. So boats are in your blood, then? You could say that, he smiled, a hint of melancholy in his eyes. Sometimes I think I ran away from it for a long time, only to realize it's where I always belonged. He turned a page in the album. And this is the old general store, where Mrs. Henderson's bakery is now. As they flipped through the album, Alara felt a profound sense of rootedness. Kalen's family history was woven into the very fabric of Oakhaven, and sharing it with her felt like an invitation. She found herself sharing stories of her own childhood, growing up in a bustling city. Their pasts, though different, found common ground in shared values of family, community, and the quiet pursuit of passion. The rain eventually subsided, leaving the air crisp and clean. Kalen suggested a walk along the beach. Bundled in their warmest jackets, they strolled along the shoreline, the waves crashing rhythmically at their feet. The sky was a dramatic canvas of bruised purples and grays, with slivers of golden light breaking through the clouds. It's beautiful, even on a day like this, Alara mused, pulling her scarf tighter. Oakhaven always is, Kalen agreed. He stopped, bending down to pick up a particularly smooth, sea-worn stone. He turned it over in his palm, then offered it to her. For your collection. Alara took the stone, her fingers brushing against his. The brief touch sent a jolt of warmth through her. The stone was cool and heavy, a perfect oval of pale gray. Thank you, she whispered, tucking it into her pocket. It felt like a tangible piece of this shared day, a small, precious memory. As they continued their walk, a comfortable silence settled between them, a testament to the growing ease in their companionship. Elara found herself wondering about the future, about what this deepening connection might mean. She had come to Oakhaven seeking solace in a fresh start, not necessarily romance. Yet, with Kalen, everything felt so natural, so right. He wasn't like anyone she had ever met. His quiet strength, his genuine kindness, his deep understanding of the world and her place within it. A few days later, a minor setback occurred with the Moonbeam K. While working on the mast, they discovered a patch of rot far more extensive than initially thought. Kalen's usual calm demeanor wavered slightly, a frown creasing his brow. "This is going to take more time, and more money," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I should have checked it more thoroughly when I first bought her." Elara saw the flash of frustration and disappointment in his eyes. She reached out, her hand gently touching his arm. "Hey," she said softly. "It's okay. These things happen with old boats. We'll figure it out. We've come too far to let a little rot stop us." He looked at her, and a small smile touched his lips. "We? All?" "Yes, we," she affirmed, squeezing his arm. "This isn't just your project anymore, Kalen. It's ours. And besides," she added, a playful glint in her eye, "it just means more excuses for me to spend time around you." Kalen's smile widened, and he covered her hand with his own, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "You know, Elara, you have a way of making even the most frustrating things seem manageable, maybe even enjoyable." His touch lingered, a silent promise hanging in the air. Elara's heart thrummed a little faster. It was the first truly intimate gesture between them, and it felt both momentous and utterly natural. They spent the next few days researching solutions, consulting with an older, experienced boat builder from down the harbor, and even Elara found herself delving into online forums about mast repair. They worked late, fueled by shared coffee and the determination to overcome this hurdle. The challenge, rather than dividing them, seemed to draw them even closer, forging a bond of shared purpose and resilience. One evening, as they were clearing up tools, the scent of sawdust and fresh varnish thickened the air. Kalen straightened up, stretching his back. "You know," he began, turning to Elara, "I haven't felt this alive in a long time. Working on the boat, yes, but more than that, being here with you." Elara's breath caught in her throat. She met his gaze and saw the sincerity, the quiet depth of his feelings reflected there. "I feel it too, Kalen," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "This cottage, Oakhaven, it felt like home from the moment I arrived, but with you, it feels like belonging." He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Belonging," he repeated, the word a soft caress. He lifted a hand, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, and the contact sent a shiver of pure delight through her. That's exactly it. Their eyes locked, and the world outside the boatyard seemed to fade away. The sounds of the harbor, the distant cry of gulls, all receded into a soft hum. There was only the warmth of his gaze, the gentle touch of his hand, and the undeniable pull between them. It was a moment suspended in time, charged with unspoken emotions and burgeoning desire. Kalen leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Elara didn't want to. Her heart pounded a steady rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. She closed her eyes just as his lips, warm and soft, met hers. It was a kiss of quiet tenderness, a gentle exploration, a confirmation of all the unspoken feelings that had been building between them. It tasted of salt and wood smoke, of shared laughter and quiet understanding. Elara felt a profound sense of peace bloom within her, a feeling of coming home to a place she hadn't even known she was searching for. She responded with equal warmth, her hand finding his arm, holding on as if to anchor herself in this beautiful, unexpected moment. When they finally broke apart, it was with a soft sigh, their foreheads still resting against each other. Kalen's thumb stroked her cheek, and his eyes, when she met them, were alight with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the most exquisite way. "Elara," he murmured, his voice husky. "You are everything I didn't know I was looking for." She smiled, a genuine radiant smile that felt like sunshine after a long winter. And you, Kaelin, are the most wonderful surprise Oakhaven could have given me. The kiss had changed something, shifting the landscape of their relationship from warm friendship to something deeper, more intimate, more profoundly romantic. The air between them now hummed with a new energy, a quiet promise of what was to come. In the following weeks, their affection deepened with every shared glance, every lingering touch. They fell into a rhythm of comfortable intimacy, their mornings starting with Kaelin's arrival, followed by productive hours at the boatyard, punctuated by easy conversation and shared meals. Evenings were often spent at Alara's cottage, reading quietly by the fire, discussing their work, or simply enjoying the comforting silence of each other's presence. The Moonbeam K was finally nearing completion. The new mast was securely in place, the decks gleamed with fresh varnish, and the engine, lovingly serviced by Kaelin, purred like a contented cat. They had meticulously planned every detail, from the sturdy rigging to the comfortable cushions for the small cabin. One sunny afternoon, as they admired their handiwork, Alara ran her hand along the smooth, newly painted hull. "She's magnificent, Kaelin. Truly, you've brought her back to life." He stood beside her, his arm gently circling her waist, pulling her close. "We brought her back to life, Alara. And in doing so, I think we brought a little life back to ourselves too." He turned her to face him, his eyes sparkling. "She's ready for the water. Are you ready for an adventure?" Alara's heart soared. The thought of sailing the Moonbeam K, the boat they had poured their hearts into, with Kaelin by her side, filled her with an exhilaration she hadn't felt in years. "More than ready," she breathed, leaning into his embrace. The day of the launch was crisp and clear, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. A small gathering of Oakhaven locals, including the friendly Mrs. Henderson from the bakery and the wise old boat builder, Mr. Finch, had come to witness the event. Alara felt a flutter of nerves, but mostly, a profound sense of pride and joy. As the ropes were released and the Moonbeam K slid gracefully into the cool harbor waters, a cheer went up from the small crowd. The boat floated perfectly, a beacon of creamy white and navy blue against the sparkling sea. Kaelin turned to Alara, his smile wide and radiant. "She's home." Alara's eyes were brimming with happy tears. "She is," she agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "And so am I." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a silent promise in their grip. "Come on," he said, gently pulling her towards the gangplank. "Let's take her for her first proper spin." Stepping onto the deck of the Moonbeam K felt like stepping into a dream. The wood was solid beneath her feet, the air smelled of fresh paint and salt, and the gentle rocking of the boat was a comforting rhythm. Kaelin helped her into the small cabin, showing her the compact but cozy bunk, the tiny galley. "It's perfect," she whispered, her heart full. Soon, Kaelin had the engine humming, and they cast off from the dock, waving goodbye to the cheering onlookers. The Moonbeam K cut smoothly through the water, leaving a gentle wake behind them as they headed out towards the open bay. The sun was warm on her face, the breeze cool and invigorating. Alara stood by Kaelin at the helm, her hand resting lightly on his arm, feeling the steady strength of him. She looked out at the endless expanse of blue, at the distant line of the Oakhaven coastline, now a familiar and beloved sight. The cottage, nestled amongst the trees, seemed to wink at her from afar. This wasn't just a boat, it was a vessel of new beginnings, a testament to shared effort and growing love. The journey had indeed just begun, and Alara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that with Kaelin by her side, every ripple and wave would lead them exactly where they were meant to be. The Moonbeam K was ready to sail, and so were their hearts, charting a beautiful course together into the shimmering horizon of their shared future. The day of the Moonbeam K's maiden voyage dawned with a whisper of rose and gold across the eastern sky. A gentle breeze, carrying the scent of salt and pine, stirred the curtains in Kaelin's cottage, rousing Alara from a dream of sun-drenched sails. Her heart thrummed with a nervous excitement she hadn't felt since her first gallery opening. Today was bigger, though. Today was personal, a launch not just of a boat, but of a shared dream. They walked hand in hand down to the dock, the air crisp and invigorating. A small cluster of Kaelin's friends and neighbors, who had watched the boat take shape, had gathered, their faces beaming with pride and good wishes. There was a quiet cheer as Kaelin untied the last lines, his movements practiced and sure. Alara, standing beside him, felt a surge of pride, not just for the magnificent vessel, but for the man who had poured his heart and soul into every plank and screw. The Moonbeam K slipped into the water with a soft sigh, barely a ripple disturbing the glassy surface of the harbor. It floated effortlessly, a testament to Kalen's craftsmanship shimmering in the morning light. Elara's breath caught in her throat. It was real. They climbed aboard, a shared glance passing between them, a silent promise of adventures to come. Kalen started the engine, a low rumble vibrating through the deck, and with a gentle wave to the well-wishers on shore, they eased out of the harbor. The moment they cleared the breakwater, Kalen cut the engine. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull and the cry of gulls overhead. He unfurled the sails, and Elara watched, mesmerized, as the canvas billowed, catching the wind like a grateful breath. The Moonbeam K leaned into the breeze, accelerating with a grace that belied its sturdy build. Elara stood at the bow, feeling the spray on her face, the wind tangling her hair. The world opened up around them, the endless expanse of the sea, the distant coastline a blurry smudge of green and brown. This wasn't just sailing. It was flying, a liberation of the spirit. Kalen joined her, his arm encircling her waist, pulling her close. His warmth was a comforting anchor in the vastness. "Beautiful, isn't she?" he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, his chin resting on her shoulder. "She's magnificent, Kalen," Elara whispered back, tears pricking her eyes. "And so are you." They spent the day simply sailing, letting the wind be their guide. They found a secluded cove, its waters a brilliant turquoise, and dropped anchor. Kalen taught her how to tie a proper knot, his hands guiding hers, their fingers brushing. They shared a simple picnic lunch on deck, the sun warm on their skin, the only sounds the gentle rocking of the boat and the distant call of a seabird. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery hues, they watched in comfortable silence, their shoulders touching. The Moonbeam K truly felt like home, a floating sanctuary built on love and shared dreams. Over the next few months, the Moonbeam K became an extension of their lives, a vessel for discovery and connection. They embarked on countless journeys, sometimes for a day, sometimes for a long weekend, exploring the hidden gems of the coastline. Elara, with her artistic eye, found endless inspiration in the rugged cliffs, the ancient lighthouses, and the vibrant fishing villages they visited. She filled sketchbooks with watercolors of sun-drenched harbors and charcoal drawings of weathered old salts, their faces etched with stories of the sea. Kalen, in turn, found immense joy in sharing his world with her. He taught her the constellations, pointing out Orion and the Big Dipper as they lay on deck, wrapped in blankets, the moon casting a silver path across the water. He showed her how to read the tides, how to navigate by compass, and how to tell a good fishing spot from a bad one. Elara surprisingly discovered a knack for fishing, often outcatching Kalen, much to his amused exasperation. Their shared laughter would echo across the quiet waters. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Mornings often began with coffee on the deck of the Moonbeam K, watching the sunrise paint the harbor. Days were filled with boat repairs and improvements, Kalen's passion, or Elara's art, or planning their next adventure. Evenings were for simple, delicious meals cooked in Kalen's cozy cottage kitchen, followed by long conversations, or quiet evenings reading by the fire, their feet intertwined. One blustery afternoon they encountered a sudden, unexpected squall. The sky turned an ominous gray, the wind howled, and the waves grew choppier than anything Elara had experienced. Her heart pounded, a flicker of her old anxieties threatening to resurface. But Kalen was a rock. His voice, calm and steady, guided her through lowering the sails, securing everything on deck. He moved with a practiced grace, his eyes scanning the horizon, his hands firm on the helm. Elara, despite her fear, found herself trusting him implicitly, following his instructions, her own movements growing surer with each task. When the storm finally passed, leaving behind a sky of brilliant, washed clean blue, Elara felt a profound sense of accomplishment and an even deeper appreciation for Kalen. He wasn't just a partner in adventure, he was her anchor, her safe harbor. "You handled that like a pro," Kalen said, smiling, once they were safely moored in a quiet cove, the engine purring softly. "Only because I had the best teacher," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder, feeling truly at home in his presence, in this life. Their connection deepened with every shared sunset, every quiet conversation under a canopy of stars. Alara found herself opening up to Kaelin in ways she never had with anyone else, sharing her hopes, her fears, her most vulnerable dreams. He listened patiently, his dark eyes warm and understanding, offering comfort and support without judgment. Kaelin, in turn, began to shed some of his quiet reserve. He spoke of his childhood, of building his first small dinghy with his grandfather, of the peace he found in the rhythm of the waves. Alara felt privileged to be let into these sacred spaces of his heart. One crisp autumn morning, as they were preparing to set sail for a weekend trip to a remote island, Alara received a call from her old friend Chloe from the city. Chloe was planning a visit, eager to see Alara's new life. Alara felt a peculiar mix of excitement and apprehension. She loved Chloe dearly, but she knew her friend, with her fast-paced high-fashion lifestyle, might find Alara's new world a little rustic. Chloe arrived a week later, a whirlwind of designer luggage and vibrant energy. She was genuinely happy for Alara, marveling at the Moonbeam Cay and the beauty of the coastal town. But as the days passed, Alara noticed Chloe's subtle questions, her almost imperceptible judgments. "Don't you miss the galleries, Alara? The buzz of the city? What about your career?" Chloe would ask, sipping artisanal coffee in Kaelin's simple kitchen. "This is all so charming, but are you really fulfilled?" The questions, though well-meaning, stirred a faint whisper of doubt in Alara. Had she given up too much? Was this simple, beautiful life enough? She found herself sketching less, her thoughts clouded. Kaelin, ever observant, noticed her quietude. He didn't press, but simply held her hand a little longer, offered reassuring smiles, and continued to share the beauty of their world with Chloe, taking them on a delightful sail, showing her the vibrant marine life in the tide pools, and introducing her to the warmth of their small community. One evening, after Chloe had gone to bed, Alara sat on the porch swing with Kaelin, the moonlight silvering the harbor. "Chloe's questions. They got to me a little," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just playing at this, if I belong." Kaelin pulled her closer, his arm a strong, comforting presence around her. "Alara," he said softly, his gaze fixed on the shimmering water, "home isn't a place you play at. It's a feeling. It's where your heart feels peace, where you feel seen and loved for exactly who you are. And I see you here. I see you thriving. I see you thriving. I see you thriving. I see you thriving. I see you painting with a joy I've never seen before. You belong here with me." His words were a balm to her soul, silencing the last vestiges of doubt. Alara realized then that Chloe's questions weren't a reflection of her own life, but of Chloe's expectations. Alara had found a deeper, more profound kind of fulfillment, one that resonated with her very core. She looked up at Kaelin, her heart overflowing. "You're right," she said, her voice firm. "This is home. You are home." The next morning, Alara felt a renewed sense of clarity. She gently but firmly explained to Chloe that while she cherished their friendship, her heart was truly here, in this beautiful, wild, and peaceful life with Kaelin. Chloe, seeing the genuine contentment in Alara's eyes, understood, offering a heartfelt embrace and promising to visit often. A few weeks later, with Chloe back in the city, Kaelin planned a special trip. He wouldn't tell Alara where they were going, only that it was a place they had talked about visiting for a long time. They sailed for hours, the Moonbeam Cay cutting gracefully through the sapphire waves. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, they rounded a small headland to reveal a breathtaking sight, a tiny, secluded cove, its beach a crescent of pristine white sand, flanked by ancient, gnarled cypress trees. A waterfall cascaded gently down a mossy rock face, emptying into a crystal-clear pool. "This is it," Kaelin said, his voice soft, "the place you sketched from memory, the one we dreamt of finding." They anchored the Moonbeam Cay and rowed ashore in the dinghy. As they walked along the deserted beach, hand in hand, the only sounds were the whisper of the waves and the distant cry of an eagle. Kaelin stopped beneath one of the largest cypress trees, its branches reaching out like welcoming arms. He turned to Alara, his dark eyes shining with a love that took her breath away. "Alara," he began, his voice a little husky. "When I first met you, my life was good, but it was monochrome. You brought color, light, and a whole new song. Building the Moonbeam with you, sailing her, sharing all these moments. It's shown me that my future, my real home, isn't just on the sea but with you, wherever we are. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, carved with intricate knotwork. He knelt before her, not on one knee, but with a reverence that spoke volumes. Elara Hayes, will you make my monochrome world vibrant forever? Will you marry me and let us sail this beautiful course together for all our days? Tears streamed down Elara's face, blurring the edges of the world, but her heart had never been clearer. Yes, Kaelin, she choked out. 1,000 times, yes. He opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a ring. Not a diamond, but a simple, elegant band crafted from local driftwood, inlaid with a tiny, iridescent piece of abalone shell, shimmering like a captured moonbeam. It was perfect, utterly and beautifully, eye-thin. He slipped it onto her finger, and it fit as if it had always belonged there. They embraced, a long, tender kiss under the ancient cypress, the setting sun painting them in hues of gold and rose. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, held on the very dock where the Moonbeam Quay had been built. Elara wore a simple, flowing white dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers. Kaelin, handsome in a linen shirt, looked at her as if she were the most precious thing he had ever seen. Their vows were simple, heartfelt promises of love, partnership, and endless adventure, exchanged with the gentle lapping of the waves as their soundtrack. They bought a small, charming cottage, nestled on a hill overlooking the harbor, its windows offering breathtaking views of the sea and the Moonbeam Quay, proudly moored below. Elara converted one of the sunniest rooms into her art studio, her canvases now bursting with vibrant colors inspired by her new life. Kaelin continued his work, but now with an even greater sense of purpose, often bringing Elara along to consult on designs, their shared creativity flowing into every project. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch swing, watching the moon cast its silvery glow across the water, the Moonbeam Quay, a silent sentinel in the harbor. Elara would lean her head on Kaelin's shoulder, her hand resting over his, feeling the gentle pulse of his heart. She had come so far from the bustling city, from a life she once thought was her destiny. She had found something infinitely more precious, a love that was as deep and boundless as the ocean itself. Their journey had indeed just begun, and with Kaelin by her side, every ripple and wave had led them exactly where they were meant to be. The Moonbeam Quay, their vessel of new beginnings, still sailed, carrying them to new shores and new adventures. But now, their hearts were truly anchored, not just in a place, but in each other, charting a beautiful course together, into the shimmering, endless horizon of their shared, joy-filled future. And as the moonbeam danced across the water, Elara knew, with a contented sigh, that this was just the beginning of their most beautiful story.